Good morning, my fellow yogic travelers. I'm mighty glad to be alive today, and I hope that you are too, as we continue to live, laugh, love, learn, linger, and live the life we love. Let me change the lighting here, everybody. There we go. All right, today is Friday, so it's PowerPoint Day, and this is one called the Four Foundations of Mindfulness in honor of the Buddhist teachings, and you see how important these ideas are in any system you might be involved with, or no system at all, just self-reflection and observation. So the four foundations of mindfulness are body posture, feeling states, mental states, and consciousness itself. So that means be aware of yourself when you're standing, sitting, reclining, or walking or moving. Your body is always in some posture. Just awareness of where your body posture is already bringing mindfulness into the present moment. Feeling states, I don't want to get nuanced about emotions and whether you're glad, sad, mad, scared, bad, whatever. This is more just generalizing. Is the feeling tone positive, negative, or neutral? You like it, you don't like it, and indifferent, right? You want to go towards it because it's pleasant, you wish to hold it. You want to get rid of it because you don't like it, push it away from you, or you're kind of bewildered and confused and not even sure what you're experiencing. Those are the feeling states. The mental states have to do with recognizing states of consciousness and your thought forms. Am I thinking about the past now? Am I thinking about the future now? Making comment on what's going on in my body or in the environment. So the very working of your mind to recognize those things, those are the mental states. And then consciousness itself is what is it that enables you to perceive your body posture, your feeling states, or your mental states? Or as I like to say, you walk into a room and it's dark, you can't see anything. You put the light on, now everything is clear and distinct. You see the difference of the chair, painting hanging on the wall, the lamp, the rug, and so forth. But the light, which is illuminating those things, is none of those things which is illuminating. So we're trying to trace consciousness back to its source. So you see, what is consciousness in and of itself without the contents being identified with? All right, so moving along, I am fortunate enough to say that I have a teacher and have had a teacher that was impressive for me. Yoga teaches you to cure what need not be endured and endure what cannot be cured. So this is the last 9 years, I've learning to endure what can't be cured. My teacher helped me with this. And the guru is a person who's on fire and is devoted to the passion to want to find out. And I do as well. I'm on that search to recover what they call the lost princess in the Jewish tradition. The youthfulness, the radical amazement, the wonder, the joy, the beauty, when you still believed and the world was enchanted. Well, the way I suggest you do that is you go on the hero's journey. You take the initiation that requires you to separate yourself from what you know. We experience a certain kind of disorientation, doesn't work the way it used to. And then you have to hold your feet to the fire and go into what they call the zone of magnified power, where you do battle with the forces of your own ignorance. And everybody's demons are ubiquitous. Our shadow stuff is all over the place. It's our job to deal with it and confront it. They may give garish images to over dramatize the idea, like facing the man-eating giant, or the witch that curses you, and if you don't answer the right question on the spot, she eats you, right? Or any kind of monster and so forth that you have to deal with, like Medusa or the Gorgons and so forth. But if you got what it takes and you prevail, then you return and you bring back the boon that you've wrested from the realm of the gods to serve your society. Now, there's always a question as to whether or not there's a process-oriented happening or there's a part of the path where it just happens. And it's really hard to determine what they call the difference between the gradual school and the sudden school. Everybody knows there's basically no way that water can boil and just jump from room temperature to boiling. It has to be heated up in the process. But then there comes a point where all of a sudden it bubbles, and it went from not bubbling to bubbling. That's the sudden school, all of a sudden. Like they say, you put a piece of salt in a glass of water, tastes a little salty. Keep adding salt grains, it gets to the point where it's almost super cool. And if you add one more micro salt piece, it crystallizes and becomes solid. So that jump from where it was still liquid to crystal, that's the sudden school. But it looks like it happened as a result of the gradual school. You can go on arguing if you want to in your left brain, it doesn't really matter. Now, it's always suggested that you find a space, a sacred space. I was in this place in Cordoba. It's really beautiful. Just the atmosphere itself, being in the building where the architecture is supposed to lift you up or give you a feeling of wow, and humbles your ego so you can be receptive to something else coming in. Now, of course, the ultimate sacred space is right within yourself, is the consciousness that you have and your own brain discovering how intelligent it could possibly be. But sometimes being out in nature, or we can design things that help put you in that mood, helps create the bhava or the ambience that you need to be receptive to surrendering to something greater than yourself. Now, we all have to have some humility, like the blind men and the elephant, old story. You know, they heard an elephant was coming to town. No one had ever seen an elephant before. But the blind men, even though they couldn't see, they would like to go and find out what it is. So they all went and started inspecting the elephant, and one touched the trunk and said, oh, it's like a, a spear that touched the tusk. It's like a spear. It touched the ear. Oh, it's like a winnowing fan. One touched the leg. It's like a pillar. One touched the side of the elephant. Oh, it's like a wall. One touched the tail. So it's like a whisk, fly whisk, One touched the trunk. It was like a moving snake. So they all perceived the part. None of them saw the whole, and each part was slightly distorted based on their own blindness. So in the same way, human beings think that they know, and they push their doctrine as fundamentalist dogma. But there's another part which is really mysterious, and we don't know if you have any humility. Or you could even say that, can we accept the fact that people see things in different ways, like the story of the chameleon? People were arguing in this village as to this lizard that they saw on the tree. One said, well, it's definitely red. And I said, no, it's definitely blue. The other said, no, listen, it's green. And then the sage came by and said, you're all right, it's a chameleon. And depending on which angle you're seeing it from, that's the color you're going to perceive. Can we be that smart? Such a simple story to realize we're all limited by our own subjective perception. And we can accept that other people see the same thing slightly differently at the same time. So can we all take our shoes off, the karma that we walk around in every single day, and face the center simultaneously? Can we hook up and imbue ourselves with the religious experience of awe, significance, connectedness to the origin of our own self, get reborn, regenerated, and then come back to serve all society? Hopefully you have a certain center. Maybe you experience that in sacred space, but it doesn't have to be in sacred space. You can create the ritual yourself, all facing the center at the same time. Now, the danger of introspective meditation, which is really strange for somebody who's done introspective meditation my whole life, is you take somebody else's symbol system from outside into yourself. And although there's some merit there, it's still somebody else's symbol system. And so ultimately, you want to empty your own mind, not by even your own stories, and find out what is consciousness free from identifying itself with its own content. And there's some darkness there. You're going to have to step out of the verbiage of your mind, stop the rational mind, stop the world, I want to get off. And at some point, let go of what other people are telling you there is to be found, which then means you're just comparing, and then you're going to find supposedly what's already known. If you're going to find the adventure that takes you into the unknown, you have to let go of what other people say there is to be found and perceive directly yourself. Now, this is another interesting thing, the pain assessment tool, from zero, no pain, to worst possible pain at all, and how to distinguish pain from suffering. Because I don't think anyone has an option about not to have pain in life. It's just the degree to which you're going to have it, and the intensity, and how long it lasts, and how you cope with it, and so forth. But suffering, which is the fuel you add to the fire, that's optional. How much you want to carry it around like a drama king or queen, Does your pity pot really serve you? Does being a victim really help? How much longer do you want to carry that around? So it's an interesting thing to distinguish pain from suffering and realize that the suffering is much more optional. The pain you really don't have any choice about, except how you're going to deal with it. Now, the advantage and disadvantage, this is one of my old teachings I like, so I'll refer to my notes in this because this is a lot to say. Every path has a way, when you start to weigh it, that has advantage and disadvantage. When you talk about jnana yoga and the path of intellectual discrimination, its main benefit is it teaches you discernment, how to create discrimination between all temporal phenomena that you get. And the whole purpose of Jnana Yoga is to experience the Atman, or the true self. You can learn more about that in the Brahma Sutras or the Upanishads. Just keep applying their mantra, neti neti, not this, not that. You negate everything that your mind comes up with when you ask yourself the question, who am I, Vichara Atman? And whatever's left, if you've negated everything, that's it. So it's strong focus on self-realization, but the negative part is without a teacher, you can get into a deluded state, thinking you're in an elevated state of transcendence when you're really in a dissociated state of schizophrenia. So one is a stage of enlightenment, one is like closer to kind of like social autism. So part of the key is to remember you're not rejecting the phenomenal world for the transcendental world, because spirit has two aspects: eternal stillness, but also eternal activity. Then the Raja Yoga, which is the one that Hatha Yoga is involved in as a system within that eightfold path, you sometimes are so deep into not doing or passivity, right? You think quietism is better, to contemplate and not do anything in the world is a higher state, but you can easily deceive yourself. Again, thinking that you're going into these deep states of samadhi by making your body immobile, not thinking, not breathing, not talking. But in some ways, of course, sitting still and being quiet is open to anybody. That's the advantage. And if you have a teacher, you can recognize the different stages you're at. But the disadvantage is that it requires a large amount of time. It's almost like you have to live in seclusion or be a recluse or isolate yourself. And in the modern world, very few people either want to make that commitment or create a lifestyle where that's even possible. So, although it gives you a framework or a context in which to understand this, it really makes the accomplishment of this filled with certain kinds of obstacles. And so, if you're not going to be able to isolate yourself or live a life off the grid and on retreat, Raja Yoga in its fullness probably won't be the final cup of tea for you. Now, we move into what we call Bhakti Yoga, which is another interesting way. It's devotional yoga. It's really great to have your heart opened up, whether you use external props like mantras or visualizations of your teacher or focusing on tankas, whatever it is that opens your heart and brings you to joy or ecstatic states. That's fantastic. And of course, if it just has to do with opening your heart to love, well, there's no limit here, because there's no one thing that you can only love. It can be anything what opens your heart. So to that extent, it's probably the easiest thing to connect to, is to see what your feeling nature is. But of course, the negative thing is you don't want to create any kind of overly emotional dependence on anything outside of yourself. It's really hard to find spiritual maturity when you're still acting like a child and you feel like you need a big tit from the sky to keep sucking on for the rest of your life. So also, one of the drawbacks is you can get so lost into the feeling nature that the psychoanalytic self-reflective discrimination that you need to do is often left aside. And remember, Jesus said you should become as little children, not be like a child. And so to find out what it is to be childlike without being childish, that's a discrimination you have to make. Otherwise, your devotion can easily slip into a dreamy sentimentalism. But love is a fuel that can drive the rocket of your desire into some really beautiful and deep places. So remember, keep your heart open. And the last one I want to talk about is karma yoga. And the advantage of the path of action, of course, is everybody has to act. Nobody is free from not acting. Right? Your body's even acting when you're sitting still and sleeping. No one can not act. But the key is, can you transform your daily actions away from self-centered or selfish action, which is always goal-oriented, and that binds you to karma, to selfless service for no other reason than it's the right thing, and giving up attachment to the fruits of your actions. So that's fantastic. But the applicability for the modern person who's always on the go and we're goal driven, great, do it. But if you don't balance frenetic activity with stillness, then your own actions may become a force for positive social action, but nothing more than that. Or as I like to say, you may deal with your own issues. And so to that extent, yoga has helped you to increase the intent that you have, which is to be a better human being. But it's all about you. And of course, the impact it may have on the rotten social institutions that bind us all in our society, nothing whatsoever. So no matter how much you keep working in a 24-hour period, there's always stuff that never gets done. So it can be a frustrating path, but you're always trying to get it right and you never get it done. So how can you ever get it right? So hopefully you won't use your action as a slippery slope of workaholism to avoid your spiritual practices. And you can learn to find some acceptance about the fact that there's always going to be a little incompleteness in everything that we do. All right, so that's a little quick flyby of advantage and disadvantage of Karma, Raja, Jnana, and Bhakti Yoga. And so like the last few things I want to say is don't accept teachings blindly. The first thing you got to do as a good yoga scientist is turn up the heat, turn up the Bunsen burner, test the truth of the teaching in the fire of your own practice and come to your own authentic experience. And then that's where the light shines in. I love that story about a runner who had his leg amputated from a car accident. And for a couple of years, he was like so bitter. And he was doing art therapy. And after a couple of years, when he'd learned to with a prosthetic device to walk around, he even went to the other people in the hospital, and he would go to somebody like who was an opera singer and had both breasts in cancer mastectomy taken off, and she was so upset she couldn't sing. He would pop off his leg and hop around the room and said, "Listen, if I can dance, you can sing." Anyway, when it got to 2 years of therapy, his art therapist said, "I think it's time to wrap it up." And they went to review all of his drawings and stuff. And the first drawing that he did was on top. And the therapist said, "You remember this?" He said, "Of course I did. You asked me to make an image of how I felt about my body." And I drew a flower vase that was cracked in the middle, indicating it would never function the way it was intended to. And it was whole and not broken. And he looked at the drawing and said, "Oh, that drawing is not finished." So she pushed the crayons over to him, and he took out the yellow, and over the crack, which was all black, and he had done it with his face kind of skewed in anger, he recrayoned yellow over the crack and said, "See here where it's busted? That's where the light shines in." And so finally, one of my favorite quotes from Meister Eckhart to take us out for today: if you don't know how to live without a why, work without a why, or love without a why, you'll never know how to live, work, or love, or why. Peace.